Thank you. Any questions from the room? You?
Bernard, you've got to, at some point, add a substantial codicil, I would think. Certainly, I haven't really grasped the whole tenor of a very complex argument. But as somebody who had to perform in this, you've got two different areas. There's the public performance, and we saw it with Muldoon, you can remember, the public performance on the stump. And I can go back through several of the other Prime Ministers, go back to Savage, Massey and Seddon in our lexicon. And the different performance required to dominate Parliament. And at some point or other, it'd be worth coming to that, because unless the leader can dominate Parliament, he won't remain leader.
Well, this is where wit is a martial art, and we know how effective at question time. And I have...
but it's more in the set debate speeches,
well,
which you get very few now.
Yes.
But certainly in my day, and going back, if you go, as you have, you go back.
I mean, to my discredit, I wasted my time and my mind thinking up incredibly funny quips about people in Parliament.
Why not? Rather fun.
I don't do that sort of thing now, but the fact is it's a martial art. It has to be done. But all I was accounting for today is the particular genre of writing that you excelled in, because the first time I heard that there were live good orators in New Zealand was when I was in my 5th form, and our English teacher said you were the only one worth listening to on the radio.
Yeah.
This was 1977.
Yeah.
So there's a way of looking at it. But here's a way of it. Simon Upton once gave me a typescript speech that he kept. I don't know how he had it, and it was by Muldoon.
Yeah.
And it was a speech by Muldoon in 1969, and it was a speech on education policy.
Yes.
And it was very good.
Yeah.
I mean, Muldoon was someone who tried to master this art and did it very well. That is, there was a time in his career.
And it is possible.
Yep.
He wrote that speech himself.
Yeah.
I don't say he did, because I don't know.
Simon said he did, and he said Muldoon had talked about it with him.
Yeah.
And it's evident he'd been reading, he'd been thinking, he had drawn his own conclusions.
That's right.
That is, his mind was imperial in its scope. He drew everything in, he was an autodidact, and it was a very good reasoned piece, a very strong mind at work.
Powerful mind.
Yes, yeah. So I say that under the law of charity to him. He did it, he did very good ideas pieces.
We'll assess that, as you say.
That's different from the stump Hugh, or what he did in Parliament, or I can only account for what it is that I've contributed to. It's obvious that I've never written the other kinds of speeches.
Like Keith Holyoke, the ones I can think of, Kirk was good, they could get up and debate with power, preferably without notes.
Yeah.
Holyoke was much better if he left his speech notes.
Well, you had to turn debating into just natural conversation.
Yeah.
It has to be a formal
He
conversation.
knew his subjects. That was their great gift. The powerful ones, the real leaders. And I suspect that was true of Seddon, because I mean, you were the one who induced me to read a bit of Seddon.
Well, I think this is where we have to be critical of academic culture.
Yeah.
Academic culture critiques, so it says. It says it's the social conscience of the country and all that. But academia itself needs to be critiqued, because the thing about the Victorian mind, minds like Peel, minds like Gladstone, people like Disraeli, is that they could go away and swat and just come to their own conclusions and develop their own policies and get up as their own policy analysts, get up and 2 hours later deliver themselves of a new approach. And you knew that the man, because it was all just men then, had mastered the field, to use another gender-laden word. But you didn't have to be a professor. You didn't have to have a score of articles behind you. You didn't have to this or that. In fact, the authority was the conviction and reason with which you have demonstrated that knowledge.
Yeah. Mind you, you picked there three very powerful minds. I mean, come back to ours and have a look through.
I think we're good too.
Well, Peel, Gladstone and whatever. But most of our Prime Ministers and particularly have not been particularly learned in that, but they have grasped very quickly the art of debate and speech.
Yeah, Disraeli had a very irregular education, but you've told me from your personal experience how good Pierre Trudeau was.
Yeah.
Well, Trudeau was almost Victorian in his ability to...
Without any experience,
yes,
as far as one could see. Yeah.
So I think that critique starts with critiquing the academy, and we should have the confidence to do what professors otherwise think is their province.
Yeah.
And just give 2 or 3 months honest thinking of an issue, reasoning it through, and whether it's select committee or some inquiry or getting up in the House or producing a think piece, just do better than them. Deliver it. Because think how much a professor costs. Think of the specialisation of a professor. Think how professors go for Marsden funding and all sorts of funding, how long it is to get them to fire their guns and deliver, and how underwhelming the results can be at times, though not always. Well, we just have to do rapid fire. We have a semi-automatics of thought. We're using semi-automatics, we're using small arms here.
In the parliamentary and political arena.
Yeah,
yes.
And I think we should be quite confident about using ideas as small arms.
It's
semi-automatics.
like a war.
Yeah.
It's seasonal.
Yes.
And there isn't you're caught on that screen. You can't really shift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think on that note we would have caught even Muldoon's attention. You think so?
No, he wouldn't have listened.
What's that he would have? He would have agreed
All that
with
academic coddle.
Oh yeah, well, but I've just critiqued it, Hugh.
I've just critiqued it, putting us down.
Yeah, yes, I did.
Be interesting how he did.
Oh well. Any other questions, please?
I have a rather odd one. Preface it by, if you're giving a speech to a hostile audience,
Oh yeah.
what would you recommend would be touchstones?
Well, there's a good thing that Bishop Selwyn did. Bishop Selwyn, of course, was the Bishop of New Zealand at the height of our wars, and well, of course he was built like a truck, and he was big, so that helps. He's one of those muscular Christians, but he had to walk down the main street of New Plymouth, which then didn't have a name. It was just a street with no name, and a crowd of 1,000 followed him, and he was regarded as pro-Māori, as a fellow Māori, and very suspect. And the People's Republic of Taranaki was like an Afrikaner republic. They wanted to go out and can I shoot 'em pa and have a war with Waitara or whatever. So this crowd of 1,000 hooted and bayed behind the bishop as he walked down the street, and it was like, in the English cultural tradition, it was like rough music. It was like a skimmington. And as we know from reading Hardy's novels from the Mayor of Casterbridge, a skimmington is a burlesque done outside someone's house or in front of someone when their mode of living in the community is considered reprehensible. So he just turned around very coolly in his gaiters and his bishop's suit and all of that, and his frock coat, and just said, I thought it was more Englishman-like to say to a man's face what it is you have on your mind. So here we see the fronting up, and they stopped, and words were exchanged, reasoned, polite words, and 3/4 of an hour they shook hands and everyone went away happy. But all they wanted was someone, I think this is locked into our very mindset, they wanted someone to front up, someone who seemed to have a secret. So I think it's very different from Australia, where you get frenzies of rage, pogroms, where you got poodles torn to pieces during the time of nuclear testing by enraged Brisbane mobs, French polishers' shops ransacked, Lebanese hunted off the beaches, Tamils bashed up in railway stations, that sort of thing. It's not power that's suspected here. It's the fact you might be withholding something, imparted. So that is what the Bishop of New Zealand was doing in that case. He was thought to be party to a policy. The public wanted a war. He was thought to be holding the government back from having that war. Grey was suspected of deep ambivalence at that time. This is just a year before the war, before the Waikato War. Grey was actually thought to be PC, to be very dodgy, despite what he had just done. And of course he became sensationally popular when troops invaded on the 12th of July 1863, but no one knew that in Taranaki in 1862. But that's how it's done. That I suggest is that it was a very hostile mob. I think they would have insulted the bishop or thrown things at him, or they would have splattered him with ordure or something of the kind, but that's how he handled it. So I think the psychology here is that we don't really have hostile mobs. I've seen some very serious things. I've seen some very serious incidents here in New Zealand. I don't wish to disclose where they are, what they were, or what happened, because I was a servant of a minister, a member of parliament. It's not for me to pick out particularly angry communities and inappropriate forms of behaviour. It's not for me to do that. But
you had it in New Zealand, haven't you, in the 3 periods. In the Depression, you got the rise, 1913, 1951, the waterfront was pretty nasty.
I wasn't around then.
So you can think about it.
Yes, I can think about it. Okay, but my experience in New Zealand, in the modern New Zealand polity, is that fessing up and fronting up are the ways to see it through.
As they did, in a way, with the Maori land march, do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Or not?
I think so, yeah.
Did they? Sorry.
Is that a good answer? Because we don't really have that, we don't really have unreason. What we have here are splintered, sectarian, fundamentalist fragments of the truth. People come proffering their truth like a shard. I've got the shard, I'm right, you know, you bastards, that sort of thing. You get that. But you don't get the destruction of reason itself. We haven't had a tea party. We're not going to have a tea party. No.
Angela.
Oh.
Hello.
Hello.
I was just wondering, you said that the speeches used to use irony. Is there a reason why you think they don't use irony anymore?
Culturally, irony was an elite, upper-class Victorian practice. And I think one of the reasons why elite Victorians did it was to show their power. So you showed your hauteur. Also, Victorians had a problem that we don't have. Believe it or not, this world around us now is shaped by the fact that we have a logic adequate to what it is that our science wants us to do and think. So we've had that for about 100 years now. There was a great logical revolution at the beginning of the 20th century in Germany and Britain. And the Victorians didn't have that. Victorians had a very Procrustean logic. They were still using Aristotelian logic, and they couldn't actually prove propositions. They couldn't even, they were figuring out how the hell do we even prove that something is true even scientifically when we know that in an experiment it does work. They didn't have the language or the reasoning tools to do this. So Victorians were awash in an agnosticism about proof. Now if you're an elite Victorian and you know you can't pick up a marker pen and demonstrate it logically on a whiteboard, what is one response? Irony. Oh, we can't really know anything, so we just go and do it. And I think that was quite prevalent in Germany, America, Britain, France. There was no way to actually demonstrate in terms of language why a proposition might be true. It was just bursting. The rivets, the boilerplates, everything was bursting with the logic at the time. George Gray and Samuel Butler were trained in a retro-Aristotelian logic pioneered by the Archbishop of Dublin, Richard Whately. That was utterly inadequate to what science was doing at that time. Utterly inadequate. So it was also seen as very elite. It was a sign of being in the upper classes that you could just have very clean shoes, beautiful uniforms, beautiful clothes, nice starched shirts, and hauteur, you know, deploying irony took great intellectual skill to sustain even. So Gray used to hold interviews by putting his boots up on the desk, and if he was interviewing someone he did not like, he would stretch all 6'3" of them up on the desk, his boots like mirrors, and he would peel an apple and not even look at it. And he'd just talk and talk and talk and talk to his general or his auditor general or his attorney general, as the case may be, and he'd just go on peeling the apple. And the spirals were minute and thin, and he never snapped them. And at the end of the interview, get lost, like that. After depositing it, it was a sign the interview was over. So we had that, and I'm suggesting that utopia is our great, utopics are our great poetic site in this country. It's also part of liberalism. I'm from a centre-right political tradition, so I'm all for liberalism, and I like the idea that irony is the mode of engagement, of expressing that, but I connect with wider New Zealand traditions by saying we all share in a utopian dream. And we all critique utopia, and the whole thing that makes utopia work, what makes it such fun, is that it is an ironic exercise. The whole mode is irony. There's nothing in Thomas More's utopia that is not contradicted or retracted in part. So More says the utopians do this and do that, and they love peace, and they're pacifists. But look, they do black ops. They assassinate their opponents. They have an MI6. You know, so we get an idea of this from watching Wolf Hall or the Tudors or whatever. So I think it's something we should recover. We should recover utopia, we should recover irony, and we should recover our proper liberalism.
Grace. Sorry, Grace.
Oh, hello.
Two-part question.
Yes.
With regards to modern relevance. In my opinion, in critiquing of our current Prime Minister, I would say that his oratory skills render him highly incapable of performing his duties. And I question as to the ability of us as a general public to be allowed to critique our leadership and pose questions to him that require him to demonstrate his logic and reasoning, given the way in which our media is currently structured. And furthermore, second part of the question, how are we going to endeavour as a society to open this logic and reasoning that comes from above in a way that allows for discourse and rhetoric?
Well, the second one is better universities, because we lack great graduate school universities. And I'm going back to Oxford tomorrow, and we have nothing like that here in this country. And being a young person, going to an MCR at Oxford or Cambridge, or joining a seminar at Yale, Princeton or Harvard is a life-changing experience. You can still be young, you can still be cool, you can still be hip, but hell, ideas fly. And it's like a hard game of rugby. We have nothing quite like that here. So we have better universities able to...
Listening over a period of time to a range of great minds.
A range of great minds, and also having as your own peers and age mates when you're 24, people from diverse disciplines, and you're actually obliged to pull it together. So it's more than just a beach party, it's an ideas party as well. We have nothing like that here. There's nothing comparable. In fact, there's a lot of inhibition and suppression. So I'd say the universities have a lot to answer for in this country before I'd be blaming Mr. Key for anything. As for Mr. Key, I won't talk about him, but I'll talk about the constraints on the office of Prime Minister. I commended Sir Michael Cullen and Bill English as Deputy Prime Minister, as Deputy Prime Ministers and Ministers of Finance for their think pieces. I'd put to you, is it really the place of the Prime Minister to be doing these think pieces or ideas pieces? It's possibly in the drama of New Zealand politics, not the office to do it from. It might well be. It depends on the personality, on the person. But Helen Clark managed anti-rhetorically. And in that way, I suggested might have a Presbyterian origin. She avoided these big think exercises. Prime Ministers get by on sound bites. David Longy did. We all remember his sound bites. We all remember his wit. Helen Clark used different techniques, but we remember the sound bites. So I think there is a particular mode expected of the New Zealand Prime Minister in which the big speech, the Blairite speech, is not required. I think the Blairite speech would be, which is a particular genre of think piece, would be very suspected in this country. It's for other ministers to do that. That's my, is it all right? As an answer? That's my experience. I'm only giving you my experience on it.
Well, it's just gone past 2 o'clock, so I think I should draw it to a close. If that's all right. Unless there was one burning question out there, but I think time-wise, it's all right. Cool. Okay, Bernard, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely amazing. And I just want to put your hands together to say thank you.